important part of either of these documents are about what it relates to the Russia investigation involving Cohen and candidate and President Trump. I mean, as you know, the Southern District case, except for the campaign finance stuff, is about Cohen's corruption regarding his business interests. I don't think most people can do or could care that much about that. What really matters here, and what's highly, highly significant, is how Michael Cohen helped Robert Mueller's investigation of relations between Donald Trump and Russia. And the Mueller team identifies four areas where Cohen helped Mueller with regard to Russia. And I can go through them one at a time here.
Go ahead.
The first area, there you go. The defendant provided information about his own contacts with Russian interests during the campaign and discussions with others in the course of making those contacts. Second, Cohen provided the special counsel's office with useful information concerning certain discrete Russia-related matters core to the investigation that he obtained by virtue with his regular contact with company executives during the campaign. That's Donald Trump. Third, Cohen provided relevant and useful information concerning his contacts with persons connected with the White House during the 2017-18 time period. This is a whole new area that, at least as far as I'm aware, no one knows about. The fact that they are looking into the behavior of the White House in 2017 and this year? I mean, maybe that explains our earlier report of why they were investigating or interviewing General Kelly, you know, who only joined the White House in August of 2017. Final area. Fourth, Cohen described the circumstances of preparing and circulating his response to the congressional inquiries, which were false, while continuing to accept responsibility for the false statements contained within it. But what is really significant here, I think, is that Cohen told Mueller's office about more contacts between Trump's orbit and it appears Trump himself and Russia. And that's why we're here. That's why we care about Michael Cohen. That's why we care about Robert Mueller, because of his effort to determine whether Russia participated in a conspiracy to affect the outcome of this election with one of the candidates in that election.
Well, so basically what I hear you saying, Jeffrey, is that when the president's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani and others, and the president himself, when they read this document that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, provided to the court today, they should get very, very nervous.
He should be unhappy about that. And if I could just give one more point along those lines. At the end of footnote 2 on page 4, the Mueller office says this: the defendant admitted that his account of an earlier meeting was false and that he had in fact conferred with individual one, that's Donald Trump, about contacting the Russian government before reaching out to gauge Russians' interest in such a meeting. Like, Donald Trump is talking to Michael Cohen about reaching out to the Russian government? I think that's pretty significant. Now, Donald Trump may deny this conversation took place. I expect he will. But if there is corroboration of this, this is enormously significant. This is why we care about Michael Cohen at all. I don't care about his finances. I don't care how long he goes to prison. This is very important.
Susan, what do you think?
No, I think Jeffrey's absolutely right, especially about this point of his ongoing contacts with the White House in 2017 and 2018. You know, it's significant that they're including this in this document because that means that it is a subject of interest for them. Now, whenever you have essentially lawyers for one party who's potentially implicated in criminal behavior and another party having conversations with one another, your concern is always whether or not there is a witness tampering issue, whether or not there's some attempt to coordinate false statements in advance. And of course, whenever one of those parties is the President of the United States, there's a question about whether or not dangling a pardon can actually qualify as a form of obstruction of justice. Now, I also think that this is significant whenever we think about the fact that Don McGahn sat down reportedly, I think it was for 30 hours, and John Kelly and others have now sat down and had these interviews with the special counsel's office. Now we're seeing that Cohen has also given his own story about what those communications and contacts might have looked like. So I do think that that this is, it's a single sentence, but it potentially has some really big implications.
And what sticks out to me is that basically Mueller is laying out his obstruction case because it's unclear in his final report if the public will even see that. We know there's a new attorney general nominated, but it could be fully redacted. And so you're seeing him lay out the obstruction case, basically saying in these documents, Wolf, that Cohen coordinated with others in order to, by lying to the public, in order to limit the investigations into possible Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. And while he's not explicitly saying that coordination was with the president, certainly it was no mistake that they make reference to the fact he had contact with the White House in 2018, and that he circulated his responses prior to lying to Congress with others. And so basically they're making the case that there could be a conspiracy that Cohen, along with others, could have been doing this. And that also ties in with the news today about why John Kelly, chief of staff, was interviewed. He was interviewed about Don McGahn and whether the president wanted Don McGahn to go out there and lie about wanting to fire Mueller. So all of this is now sort of tying together in terms of what Mueller is focused on beyond just the firing of James Comey as it pertains to the obstruction case.
Look, and I think it also is significant that this is coming out the same day we find out that Bill Barr is going to be the Attorney General. Now, Barr is someone who takes a very broad view of executive authority. He's the kind of person who might not believe that the president can obstruct justice by doing things like firing the FBI director. This is describing conduct that is not the president acting in his Article II capacity as President of the United States. This is the president acting as sort of an ordinary person, somebody looking out for their own, legal interests. And so I do think that that's significant, potentially, to whether or not Barr, if he ultimately is confirmed, is inclined to ultimately let Mueller's team go after the president or his close associates directly.
MJ Lee has been going through these documents as well. MJ, talk a little bit about the crimes that Michael Cohen committed and how they were designed, at least some of them were designed, according to these documents, to help individual number one, namely the President of the United States.
Well, Wolf, as we go through the SDNY filings, I think it's really important to spend a few minutes talking about the way that they laid out how Michael Cohen tried to illegally influence the 2016 presidential election. And a part of the reason, clearly, why they're asking for this substantial term of imprisonment for Michael Cohen. And it all comes down to these secret payments that we have been talking about all year. One, to Karen McDougal, and second, to Stormy Daniels. Let me just first read a key passage from the SDNY's memo. It says, quote, while many Americans who desired a particular outcome to the election knocked on doors, toiled at phone banks, or found any number of other legal ways to make their voices heard, Cohen sought to influence the election from the shadows. It goes on to say he did so by orchestrating secret and illegal payments to silence two women who otherwise would have made public their alleged extramarital affairs with individual one. That's, of course, President Trump. In the process, it says Cohen deceived the voting public by hiding alleged facts that he believed would have had a substantial effect on the election. It is so important as we listen to this language that they're not just laying out sort of the technical or the legal reasons of how Michael Cohen went about trying to illegally influence the election. They are making a really strong argument here for how Michael Cohen tried to hurt the democratic process, how he really caused deception across the country. And they didn't necessarily have to use this kind of language about how so many American voters were exercising their democratic rights to try to get the person they wanted elected president, and that while all of that was happening, here was Michael Cohen trying to protect his boss by lying about these two women who say that they had extramarital affairs with Donald Trump. So I thought that language was really important. And if you're just looking at the SDNY memo, and of course you can't really look at that on its own, because the Mueller memo, of course, is important as well. And we have to try to figure out how those two things are going to come together in determining Michael Cohen's fate. But if you're just looking at the SDNY memo, there is no question that this is a big blow to Michael Cohen, because his lawyers have been arguing for no jail time for Michael Cohen. And a big part of their strategy has been to paint this picture of a man who has come to his senses, who has now decided to cooperate fully, now wants to be the bearer of truth. But the language language in here very clearly says you do not get to do all of these things, including illegally trying to affect the outcome of the presidential election, and then say, all right, I made a mistake, I'm now pleading guilty, and then call yourself a hero. So again, just sort of reading the tone and the language of the memo from SDNY, it is very clear that they want to send a clear message that what Michael Cohen did, at least as it pertains to trying to illegally affect the election, that is extremely not acceptable and is not something that he should